Chosen one. All right, let's get one thing straight before we go any further. You are not crazy, you are not overreacting, and you are definitely not alone. If you've ever felt like you were being talked about more than you were being understood, this is for you. If you've ever had to keep your head up while others threw dirt on your name, this is your reminder that the dust they tried to bury you in, it's turning into gold under your feet. You are not here by accident. You are not ordinary. You are the kind of energy they whisper about because they can't replicate it, can't control it, and most of all, they can't dim it. And today, we're not shrinking. We're stepping into the truth. This is your moment to remember exactly who you are. Not the rumor, not the label, not the version they try to sell, but the real one, the resilient one, the rare one. So take a breath, square your shoulders, and lean in. Because the spotlight they tried to burn you with, it's lighting your path now. Let's talk about what happens when you stop explaining and start owning. They assume whispers will bury someone, yet all they do is plant seeds in the minds of strangers. Murmurs reach unfamiliar ears, and curiosity begins to stir. Instead of creating distance, their attempts to isolate bring unexpected attention. The more they talk, the more people start to wonder. Not because the stories sound true, but because repetition alone invites intrigue. People start observing from the shadows, waiting to catch a glimpse of this so-called villain. But what they see doesn't match the rumors. It's calm amidst noise, direction without defense. The contradiction unsettles them. Instead of validating the narrative, it fractures it. That moment of doubt is all it takes. Slowly, the ones who once listened begin to question everything. Not just the stories, but the source. They start tracing patterns, recognizing a hunger to stay important by tearing others down. And they grow tired of it. The storyteller loses their stage, while the one they tried to diminish continues on, untouched, unshaken. With no effort to explain or justify, authenticity becomes its own magnet. And the irony is glaring. The very attempt to discredit becomes the path to recognition, not because it was sought, but because it was inevitable. The noise fades, but what remains is presence. A presence built not by shouting over the crowd, but by moving steadily through it, looking for purpose and peace. Hit subscribe and start the journey. What often feels like betrayal is actually revelation in disguise. Moments filled with speculation and side eyes aren't just disruptions, they're clues. Every careless whisper, every silent shrug, every nod at a lie uncovers a layer of truth, not about you, but about those around you. In these moments, clarity begins to surface. Those who once stood beside you begin to show what truly holds their attention: loyalty or convenience. When belief in you carries a cost, when it's no longer effortless to be in your corner, some reveal that they were only there for the smooth path. Others, unshaken, stay rooted, not because of what's said, but because of what they know. These shifts aren't setbacks, they're illumination. The discomfort draws lines you didn't know needed drawing. It shakes out the unstable, the envious, the ones who find comfort in your struggle, and often it's the ones who smile the widest that slip away first. Those who jump at the first story told aren't reacting to truth. They're reacting to the thrill of weakness in others. But that has nothing to do with your reflection and everything to do with their own. These moments sting, yes, but they cleanse. They remove the distractions, the masked intentions, the counterfeit care. What remains isn't just smaller, it's sharper, tighter, stronger. This unraveling isn't chaos, it's curation. You're not being punished, you're being prepared. The removal isn't loss, it's refinement. And by the time the dust settles, what's left around you is forged through truth, not built on convenience. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. They want the noise to define you, but it's the silence you walk through that carves your legacy. Disruption comes and goes in waves, loud and attention-seeking, but fleeting. Meanwhile, steady motion, deliberate, clear, grounded, etches itself into memory without needing an announcement. Those who try to shake your foundation rely on reaction. They throw out distractions, fueled by theatrics and inconsistency, hoping you'll stumble. But they fail to realize it's not the sprint that wins, it's the unwavering pace. No spotlight can compete with the quiet endurance of someone who just keeps showing up, who keeps delivering without fanfare. Eyes might wander toward the spectacle, but they linger where patterns emerge. They begin to notice the way you don't flinch, the way you don't chase applause or rush to defend what's already written in your walk. The performance always fades, but presence, that lingers. Over time, repetition becomes reputation. And as others waver and contradict, your rhythm remains unbroken. Not because you shout your truth, but because you live it. The ones who once bought into the noise eventually see the contrast too stark to ignore. They realize one side is built on reaction, the other on resolve. And slowly, one lie at a time, they pivot toward what holds weight. Because endurance doesn't seek validation, it creates certainty. And while the temporary fades, the consistent remains. Unbothered, unmoved, undeniable. Step beyond the screen. Join and help light the way for others. Some don't realize they're broadcasting their insecurity until it's too late. The ones constantly mentioning your name believe they're setting the tone, spinning a version of the story that will benefit them. But repetition breeds suspicion. Eventually, the question shifts from "what did this person do?" to "why can't they stop talking about them?" Interest fades from the claims themselves and lands squarely on the intent behind them. The repetition becomes transparent, the urgency unsettling. Observers begin to notice the disconnect, how the energy invested in slandering you far outweighs anything you've ever said or done in response. And that's when curiosity pivots. Quiet glances become intentional observations. They examine how you carry on, undisturbed, focused, unshaken. Your silence amplifies their noise. Your calm highlights their chaos. Before long, the performance fractures. It no longer feels like concern or warning. It reads as envy, parading around in second-hand excuses. Because obsession isn't hard to detect. It reveals itself in how often your name replaces their own purpose. Their campaign to bury you becomes their unintentional confession. And the audience, once entertained, grows weary. The ones who watch start to question who really has the issue. The story they tried to weaponize turns into a mirror they weren't ready to face. What was meant to tarnish now exposes motive. And while they spiral in their own fixation, what grows louder isn't the gossip, but the realization that you were never the problem. Being unbothered is its own kind of defiance. And for some, that's unbearable. There are those who can't bear to witness someone steady while they themselves are unraveling. You don't have to speak for it to sting. Simply existing outside of their approval is enough to unsettle them. not because of what you say, but because of what you represent. Your composure contradicts their internal chaos. Your direction reflects everything they've left unfinished. So rather than turn inward, they lash outward, trying to smear what they can't understand. They're not fighting you. They're fighting what you expose in them. It's not about any specific moment. It's about a discomfort they can't name, a tension they can't soothe. And instead of asking themselves why they're triggered, they choose to distract others with noise. They twist your stillness into arrogance, your boundaries into hostility, your independence into threat. But the distortion doesn't hold, because people start to notice what's beneath the reactions. They begin to see the pattern, how every attack reflects the attacker, not the target. And while they try to distort your image, they trip over their own inconsistencies. Over time, what remains undeniable is your stability. Not perfect, not performative, just real. And real doesn't have to defend itself. While they stumble through projections, you're grounded in clarity. They try to chip away at something they don't understand, only to find out it doesn't break, it reflects. And when the illusion finally cracks, they're the ones left exposed. Step beyond the screen. Join and help light the way for others. Falsehoods often arrive dressed in urgency, but time has a way of stripping off their disguise. The early echoes of their slander may sound sharp, even persuasive, drawing in the eager and the impatient. But distortion isn't sustainable. It buckles under repetition, forgets its own details, and stumbles through contradictions. Meanwhile, your calm response becomes the control in a world of variables. You don't scramble to reclaim your image because it was never lost. You stay grounded, not for applause, but because it's who you are. And slowly, people begin to notice the disconnect between the stories told and the reality observed. Their narrative ages like something left out in the open too long, dry, brittle, unraveling. But your alignment deepens. Your life becomes an archive of clarity, one that doesn't require constant explanation. Each quiet step you take holds more credibility than a dozen accusations. Those watching begin to connect the dots, not because you insisted, but because truth doesn't need to be forced. It remains while everything else peels away. The ones who once echoed the noise now hesitate. They begin to question the motives behind the spectacle, the inconsistencies, the desperation. What remains in you isn't just a name cleared. It's a presence refined, not a myth or a rebuttal, but a legacy shaped by resilience and steadiness. Their words lose grip over time, but yours never needed to hold on. And that's why your story outlasts theirs. Because what's built with integrity doesn't require defense, it invites recognition. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. Some don't react, they observe. They don't jump at the first version of a story or cling to the loudest voice. They sit with the information, sift through the noise, and wait to see what unfolds in the quiet. And when they study you, it's not through the lens of rumor, but through behavior. They anticipate signs of chaos, arrogance, disruption, but instead they find clarity, intentionality, peace. You're not pacing in damage control or over-explaining your worth. You move with quiet certainty, unaffected by the spectacle others try to create around your name. The more they dig, the more they realize the contrast is too glaring to ignore. The loud ones, the frantic ones, reveal more about themselves with every exaggerated tale. But your posture stays intact, and that speaks volumes. The real ones aren't swayed by echo chambers. They search for patterns. They don't just listen, they analyze, and what they uncover shifts their allegiance. Not out of sympathy, but out of recognition. What they once doubted becomes what they now defend, not because you asked, but because your presence answers more questions than the accusations ever raised. Behind the scenes, your name begins to find its way into respectful conversations, private validations, unseen support. While others are busy rehearsing the next spectacle, you're being quietly acknowledged in places you've never stepped into. Not everyone needs convincing. Some just need to see for themselves. And when they do, the facade collapses. Because once truth is revealed, it cannot be unseen. They rely on whispers disguised as strategy, convinced that subtle jabs and quiet slander give them the upper hand. But hostility covered in calm tones still reveals itself to those who know what to look for. What they don't realize is that their tools only work on the unsteady, on the ones still searching for permission to feel worthy. But not everyone bends under weight. There are some who glide through noise without a tremor, who hold their line without spectacle. That kind of composure isn't passive, it's precise. It dismantles their intentions without confrontation. They want a scene. They want to witness you unravel. But what they get instead is stillness, deliberate, powerful, unreadable. That quiet refusal to engage becomes its own resistance. It disrupts their plan, rewrites the narrative, and in doing so, shifts the spotlight off their words and onto their motives. Over time, people start to piece it together. They notice who's fixated, who's unsettled, who keeps reaching for conflict, and who never steps into the trap. Grace in this form isn't softness, it's endurance with boundaries. And it's that restraint that eventually dissolves the spectacle. The silence that once puzzled them starts to speak. And when it does, it exposes what was always there, an inner force too rooted to be baited. Their accusations lose oxygen. Your balance becomes undeniable. And what once seemed like a campaign against you turns into a revelation about them. Because while they counted on chaos to damage your name, all they did was amplify your poise. Recognition doesn't always arrive with applause. It often enters through quiet realization. Not everyone witnesses the tension you carry or the patience it takes to stay composed while surrounded by noise. But the ones who pay attention, they see it, slowly, deliberately. They notice you're not looking for sympathy, not crafting dramatic displays, not seeking validation through spectacle. What they see is consistency in the midst of distortion. What they sense is a quiet evolution, something formed under pressure but never broken by it. You never demand to be seen, yet your presence grows harder to ignore, not because it's loud, but because it doesn't change based on who's watching. You're not here for a moment. You're built for what lasts. And people begin to realize that. The story shifts, not through your rebuttals, but through your refusal to become bitter. Even when you've been wronged, they notice how you maintain yourself when most would unravel, how your principles never fracture under stress. That kind of strength isn't dramatic, it's sacred. And those who once misjudged you start to rethink everything. Not because you adjusted to fit their expectations, but because your reality eventually outgrew the lies. They expected collapse. Instead, they watched a quiet rise. You weren't waiting for the spotlight. You were preparing without it. And now, the same people who overlooked you begin to speak your name with respect, not because you fought for their approval, but because you proved, without words, what resilience truly looks like. They believe separation will fracture your spirit, that being cut off from circles, ignored in conversations, and excluded from connection will unravel you. What they never expect is that detachment becomes your awakening. The silence they assume is punishment becomes the canvas where you sketch your clearest version. Without interference, without performance, you meet the depths of yourself, untouched by their expectations. You no longer shrink to be palatable or bend to be accepted. In that space of absence, you meet a presence far greater, your own. The distance they engineered to isolate you turns into the distance you needed to expand. What was intended to corner you ends up liberating you. Because when you're no longer held together by roles and routines, you start creating from truth, not habit. The version of you they tried to exile disappears, replaced by someone forged in solitude, someone immune to shallow validation. Their attempt to diminish you simply removes the noise long enough for purpose to surface. And in that clarity, you shed every version of yourself that was built to please people you no longer recognize. Now they can't understand how the one they cast aside has risen with more depth, more fire, more precision. But it's not mystery, it's alignment. They didn't exile you. They made space for something sacred to unfold. Now they cannot locate you in the old blueprint because you evolved past their reach. Step beyond the screen. Join and help light the way for others. They wait for you to respond like they would, impulsively, defensively, dramatically. They manufacture tension, toss around conflict, and position themselves at the center, hoping to bait you into chaos. But you remain unmoved, not because you're numb, but because you're rooted. What they interpret as silence is actually structure. It's the discipline of someone who no longer entertains empty provocation. Your stillness doesn't lack voice. It speaks in restraint. It interrupts the cycle of escalation they depend on. The energy they spend creating commotion only highlights your contrast. You don't orbit their narrative. You don't contort to fit the performance. You just keep existing in a state they can't mimic, one grounded in clarity, not confusion. Over time, it becomes clear. While they perform desperation, you demonstrate power, not by reacting, but by choosing not to. That choice unsettles them, because without your reaction, their story loses its fuel. The space you refuse to fill with noise becomes a mirror reflecting their spectacle, and it unnerves them. While they dance for attention, your stillness takes up space in its own way, subtle, deliberate, commanding. It is not absence, it is presence that needs no permission. And in the end, it's not the one who shouts the loudest who commands the room. It's the one who doesn't flinch when everything around them tries to provoke a storm. They assume their small schemes vanish in the shadows, that their bitter remarks and twisted stories stay hidden behind closed doors. But when malice is aimed at someone protected by unseen strength, it doesn't vanish. It reverses. Their intentions gather weight and return, stronger, louder, more public than they ever expected. What they speak in secret becomes a lesson taught in daylight, not by your retaliation, but by the balance life maintains without your involvement. You never engage in curses or vendettas. You walk aligned with a current they don't understand, a current that operates without spectacle, but never without justice. Every insult they craft, every rumor they launch becomes a tether to their own undoing. And it happens subtly at first, opportunities slipping, credibility thinning, support unraveling. What they tried to inflict rebounds, not because you sought vengeance, but because truth keeps record in silence. They thought they were targeting someone ordinary. What they didn't see was that you move with protection stitched into your path. They fired arrows at purpose and expected no consequence. Now the results speak for themselves. Their world shifts, their energy drains, their circles shrink, and you're still untouched, still rising, still held. It's not coincidence. It's what happens when you don't return fire, but trust that time always brings everything home. The story they tried to write for you folds in on itself. They didn't recognize who they were provoking. But now, the lesson is loud. If your heart overflows with divine love, now is the moment to let it shine. Click the super thank you button on YouTube and give $50 or more to help carry God's light to others. Your gift will bless not only your life, but countless others. You are part of His sacred plan. Your kindness may be the answer to someone's prayer. Share your blessings and honor His kingdom. May His grace guide you always. You never perform for approval or scramble to polish your name. While others are busy reshaping your image with distortions, you focus on building something that doesn't require explanation. No need to chase narratives when your life quietly contradicts them. You don't panic when assumptions are made. You don't rush to explain when whispers spread. You continue, unwavering, because truth doesn't need to yell. It just endures. What's being said about you eventually fades under the weight of what's being seen. People observe how your presence remains steady, how your steps remain clean, how your focus remains intact. And over time, the contradiction between rumor and reality grows too wide to ignore. Those who once leaned into the noise begin to question why the story feels off. Why does someone so attacked move with clarity, not confusion? With grace, not bitterness? They start paying attention to your rhythm instead of the crowd's voice. And what they discover isn't someone trying to clear their name, but someone too real to be misrepresented. You never needed to argue. The patterns you live speak for themselves. And now, the very ones who watched you in silence begin to see the difference between performance and substance, between a tale and a truth, lived out over time. The stories lose momentum, but your presence gains depth. And as people watch you remain firm while the noise crumbles, they stop asking what's true and start recognizing it on their own. Because you don't win by persuading, you win by persisting. They expected their words to erase you. They assumed that if they kept circling your name with suspicion and noise, the world would follow their lead. But something happened that none of them predicted. The attention they tried to weaponize revealed everything they meant to bury. While they were crafting narratives in the shadows, you were busy growing through your own storms, collecting depth and earning wisdom the hard way. They mistook your silence for defeat, not realizing you were using it to build something they'd never understand. You didn't flinch when your name was dragged. You didn't fold when the room turned cold. You just kept rising, not with spectacle, but with substance. And people noticed, not because you begged to be seen, but because you couldn't be ignored. Their version of you collapsed under the weight of your reality. Their campaign lost steam while you gained presence. Every time they tried to mark you with shame, they unintentionally handed you visibility. But visibility means nothing if there's no truth beneath it. And that's where you won. Because while they built noise, you built evidence. And that evidence became your credibility. Not forced, not rehearsed, just lived.